Bonjour, greetings everyone. For those of you who I haven't had a chance to meet, I'm Dr. Robert Ventruska. I'm interim president of King's University College. It's a true pleasure to welcome you this evening to the President's Lecture, which is generously sponsored by the Sisters of St. Joseph. It's my pleasure to begin our program this evening by welcoming Marianne Kijiko to the stage to offer a welcome and a blessing. And following Marianne, we'll hear a land acknowledgement from Sister Helen Russell of the Sisters of St. Joseph.
Sego Sagweg, Ganadolix, Nuwaxanot, Kalet Marianne, Nyongets, At Noal, Nungitlot, Nedag, Nunu Dioslot, Kalet London Jitnu de Nagli. Just a few words of opening and thanks and gratitude to all of those matters of creation. I want to start by saying, we gather our minds together as one and we give thanks to the people, Gunjakwa, and we give thanks to all of you here tonight and who were able to put this together. I do a lot of work with some of the Sisters of St. Joseph's, and I'm there quite often to visit and have lunch with them, and I'm really honored to be here as part of this tonight. And so I give thanks to our Mother the Earth, Yunki Nohal, and all that she gives us. And we have to be reminded every day that that's what we're supposed to be doing, is giving thanks for all that she gives us. Because with everything that is given to us freely from creation, we don't need anything else. We were given everything to sustain ourselves. But we've done a poor job in looking after it. We as human beings, we're the lowest form of creation. Everything else takes care of their responsibilities each and every day. So we give thanks to our brother the sun in the waters, Oneganas, those life-giving waters that are in crisis right now because of how we behave. So I imagine that through Niigaan's words that you'll be reminded and you'll be able to have that thought. Those little seeds will be planted of what your responsibilities are to creation. When you walk outside in the morning, you take that breath given to you by creation from the trees and from the airs. And so we don't remember all the time to give thanks for all of those things. Our brother the sun, he comes up every morning and gives us light. He never says, I want to sleep in. I don't want to get up today. He takes care of his responsibilities each and every day, as does everything else in creation. Our grandmother, the moon, she comes out every night. And so we put our minds together and we give thanks for her and all that she does. Because she has a big responsibility. She has a big job. But she does it each and every day. And the trees that give us oxygen to breathe, the birds, the four-legged ones that give us food and clothing, the stars, and those medicines that grow, all of the little medicines when we walk upon the earth, when we walk upon those grasses, there's tiny medicines in there that are put there for us. Everything was put here for us freely. And in return, we've done a poor job of taking care of them. So it's not just our responsibility as Indigenous people to take care of those things. When we look back, when they say that when we look back that we would be the only ones standing and taking care of our responsibilities as Indigenous people. But it's hard to do it alone because you're all responsible too. You live and breathe. The waters keep you alive. If we were all to die off tomorrow, all of those things in creation would continue to live and thrive. But if they were to stop, the sun was to stop shining and the waters were to stop flowing and the trees were to stop growing, we wouldn't survive. We wouldn't survive without them. So we need to be thankful. We need to be thankful for everything that we've been given, because it was given with love, and it was given with care, and it was given with kindness. And that's how we're supposed to be as human beings. We're supposed to be kind and of good minds and good hearts. And be one, be together as one, put our minds together as one, and be thankful for all that we've been given. So I just want to say in closing, I want to, thank the sky world, the rains, the thunder beings, all of our messengers that come to remind us of who we're supposed to be, and Sagoindiso, the Creator Himself, for all that we've been given in this life, this human experience. And so I want to thank you all for coming out tonight, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy Niigaan's words, and I'm looking forward to hearing him too. So Yanko Daneto.
Thank you, Marianne. Thank you. Sister Helen Russell, the Sisters of St. Joseph.
Good evening. We acknowledge that we gather on the traditional lands of Indigenous peoples, the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Attawandaron, and Wendat peoples. Lands where our ancestors entered into treaties that called for mutual respect, shared responsibilities, and ongoing relationship. We recognize that these commitments have not always been upheld. Out of deep respect for those who cared for these lands since ancient times, and those who guard and care for them still, we are committed to tread lightly on the land, respect water, and all living things as gifts of the Creator, and affirm our desire for right relations with all peoples, especially the Indigenous peoples who share our common home. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister. Thank you, Marianne, for your heartfelt welcome and blessing, and again, Sister Helen, for your moving land acknowledgement. And thank you all for being here tonight as we gather for a conversation that's not just timely but essential. It's a conversation that speaks to the heart of who we are as a Catholic university committed to truth, justice, and reconciliation. The theme of this year's series, Pilgrims of Hope, calls us to embark on a deeply personal and communal journey of renewal and reconciliation. And tonight's presentation, Not the Right Thing to Do, the Only Thing to Do, How Indigenous Education Will Save the World, speaks directly to that hope. It calls us to embrace Indigenous education as a crucial step toward reconciliation and toward building a more just and hopeful future. Indigenous education is not an add-on or an option. It's foundational to the future we hope to build together, and Indigenous knowledge systems rooted in relationship and reciprocity and respect for creation challenge us to see education as not merely the transfer of information, but a way of living responsibly with one another and with the land. We're honored here tonight to welcome Dr. Niigaan Sinclair, an award-winning writer, editor, and professor of Indigenous Studies at the University of Manitoba. Dr. Sinclair, Anishinaabe from Peguis First Nation, was named in 2022 one of Maclean's most influential Canadians. He is multiple nominee of Canadian Columnist of the Year, winning in 2018, and his national bestseller, Wînipêk, Visions of Canada from an Indigenous Centre, won the Governor General's Award for Nonfiction in 2024. It's deeply meaningful for us to have Niigaan here with us at King's, and it's, if I may say, almost 6 years to the day his father, Senator Murray Sinclair, honored us with his presence to open the Veritas Series in 2019. I know many of you were here and have distinct recollections of Senator Sinclair's insights about the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action, informed, of course, by his unique vantage point as Chief Commissioner of the TRC. I know Niigaan won't mind if I share with everyone something that his father said at the time, which connects powerfully with the topic of Niigaan's talk this evening. When he was with us, Senator Sinclair observed, and I'm quoting, "The topic of reconciliation is not a fixed conversation. We have described for you a mountain. It's for you to get to the top. Reconciliation is about you as Canadians." And we're grateful for Niigaan's presence with us and for the guidance that we'll receive in helping us to get to the top of the mountain we were discussing yesterday. We know we have a long way to go and many mountains to face. But the insights that Niigaan will share about the deep knowledge carried by and through Indigenous names and words will surely help us in the climb. As part of our contribution to the work of truth and reconciliation at King's, we're committed to meaningful change with the guidance of Indigenous partners to advance educational policies that implement in concrete ways the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action, and especially calls 59 and 60 that regard the churches and education. We're committed to teaching about the history and legacy of colonialism and residential schools, and of course the role of the churches in that system. We recognize with humility that Catholic educational institutions, in which many of us were educated and formed, played a central role in the history of residential schools and in that harm. Education, we know, which should have been a source of empowerment and human flourishing, was instead used as a tool of harm and erasure. We cannot change that past, but we can and must acknowledge it. We have to hold ourselves accountable. And in doing so, we commit ourselves to a new vision of education, one that heals and restores, and one that prepares us to walk together in dignity and mutual respect. The hard work of truth-seeking, truth-telling, and reconciliation is a fundamental principle of what we do at university. We have a moral responsibility, we believe, to seek truth, to acknowledge wrongs, to seek forgiveness, to repair relationships, and to stand in solidarity with those who've been harmed. Indigenous education matters because it teaches us how to live in right relationship, and it reminds us that knowledge is not just about the individual, but about community. And it's my great honor to welcome Dr. Niigaan Sinclair, an educator, writer, and public intellectual who's dedicated his life to advancing Indigenous voices, histories, and perspective. His leadership reminds us that reconciliation is not abstract. It is lived, it's practiced, and it begins with listening. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Niigaan Sinclair.
I like this next time. There you go, like that. Miigwech. Wonderful. Wow, okay. Hello, everybody. Apparently there's a screen somewhere that I can, or this is it. Oh, this is it right here. Okay. Look at the screen. There you go. How's everybody doing out there? Good? I've been up since like 6 a.m. because King's College really sucks you. Sucks every penny out of you. I feel like I've been through the ringer. And then they put this like big thing at the end. Like it would have been easier to do this first, but I guess you wouldn't want to be here at 6. It's nice to be here. I really I don't know, probably gonna go like this then, okay? I don't know, we'll do something here. So it's nice to be here. So, bonjour and magadaduk, Niigaan webadam de dijtakos, namago shindo damni men wendam omayayin. Bonjour and mishomasak, Nikomasak, Abijana Gije Kiban, Nadede, Namiji Nabekwe, Adonis. It's nice to share with you the language where I come from, which is Treaty 1 territory. So I come from the first treaty, the first province, and we are the homeland of the Red River Métis. And so in many ways, what you'll see in my book, that's a moment of shameless self-promotion, just over there, is I make the argument that you'll see some of the worst of this country in Wînipêk. And Wînipêk, of course, is not the not referring to the province or even the city. It's actually referring to the watershed. The word Wînipêk is talking about Lake Wînipêk and everything that flows into Lake Wînipêk from the groundwater, which goes all the way to Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, northwestern Ontario, North Dakota, South Dakota, Michigan, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Northwest Territories, Nunavut. Everything flows into Lake Wînipêk. We are the ground zero of the entirety of the good, bad, great, ugly of this country. We are the inheritors of some of the worst parts, but we have therefore found the most amount of solutions. And so my argument in my book is that we talk a little bit about what is the center of this country, and it is not Toronto. The center of this country is actually in Wînipêk. It's in the places in which we have navigated colonialism and we have thought about the solutions that are potential. And then, of course, we're not the best, but we have done it most frequently, and other places have done incredible work too. Look at this event tonight and all the great work being done at Western. But we really might want to think deeply about where do we look to for the future of this country, because I don't think we're going to find it a lot on Bay Street, but we may find it on Portage Avenue. And so that's a Wînipêk reference, by the way, if you know. It's a little hometown reference. Anyways, it's nice to be here. So I'm going to use my clicker here. I apologize. I have some foot issues at the moment, so I'm kind of a little bit hobbly, but I'm fine. I actually have no pain at all. It just, in order for me to heal, I have to wear this darn thing for 8 weeks. So, but I can walk perfectly fine, but then the next morning I can't walk. So there you go. That's a bummer. So you've heard some of the things that I've done, and if we had time, we would go around and do a circle. Of course, we'd be here all night hearing about different people and the different things that have been here. So I've had a chance to go to the Wampum Centre, which is amazing. What an amazing experience that was, and the incredible work that's being done there. And then so I spent time with your Indigenous students, Indigenous student leadership this morning, all your amazing support staff and the leadership over there. And then I spent time this afternoon with students, and we spent about 2 hours mucking through some of the hard challenges of what I call a group of miracles. So I got to spend an afternoon with miracles. And then I got to spend a little bit of time breathing, but only like 10 minutes. And then they were like, oh, you get an hour, but really it's 10 minutes, we lied to you. And then I got to hide over here in the hallway for a little bit. And here I am, and then I'm off to Niagara for tomorrow. So I do a lot of, I'm sort of like, this is like a mini road trip. I end off in Montreal on Wednesday. It's like busy season for those of us who are Indigenous and doing this work in September. It's probably our hardest time of year, because not only are we trying our best to lead in a good way, but we're also facing off against the trauma that each one of us are intergenerational survivors, and each one of us have to talk about that trauma and that very painful experiences that our parents have gone through, our grandparents have gone through. So this is not an easy month for us. This is like heavy lifting time. But what we hope is that there's a purpose coming out of all of this, and that's what I hope tonight is all about. In 1534, I didn't mean to turn this into a history lecture, but in 1534, Jacques Cartier sailed the ocean blue. Whatever European, we decided to make a rhyme out of that. The story is basically the same. Jacques Cartier sailed over. He was, as usual with European explorers, carrying papal bulls, doctrine of discovery, the embodiment that Christians have the right to inherit the world. And when Cartier landed at a place called Stadacona in the summer of 1534, he encountered, so Stadacona is the former site, or the now site of Quebec City, in just close to there. He encountered the Iroquoian people. So most of our relatives that are Haudenosaunee, these are your relatives. And the leader of that group of people, people didn't like that one. It's like Jimmy Kimmel. Okay, perfect. He encountered the Iroquoian people. And the leader of those people was Donnacona. But just before that, Cartier did what typical European explorers did. This is what they did, is they sailed across the ocean, carried the doctrine of discovery, which was the empowerment by the Catholic Church to empower European explorers, because Europeans didn't come over here because they were interested or even curious. That might have been something, that might have been a part of it, but that's the biggest lie I was ever told, was that Europeans were curious if the world was round. Wasn't the motivation of European exploration. Europeans were broke. They were broke because they had been warring against people in Africa, and particularly wanted a route to Asia for the richest things in the world, the biggest goods, the biggest high profit things, which were spices and gold. And so Cartier was curious. He was wanting to find where spices and gold are, if anything, profit. And so Cartier did what he typically did when we can use any of the different European explorers, De Soto, Champlain, Columbus, whatever it might be. Landing his boat, he installed a 15-foot high steel cross on the land, which at the very top of it said, La vie de roi de France. Long live the King of France, which was a claim, of course, that this was going to be the new site of fort, maybe a home, but ultimately of extraction, because Europeans were interested in taking profit and bringing profit back to the homeland. They weren't interested in setting up shop. They were interested in extraction. And so Cartier, a few moments after installing this 15-foot high steel cross, Donnacona, with other Iroquoian, mostly men, was traveling down the water and witnessed this action by Cartier. And Donnacona came on the land, and almost without saying anything at all to Cartier, immediately ordered his sons and his men around him to remove the 15-foot high steel cross and pull it down. So that's the first moment of contact between Europeans and Indigenous peoples in this place, unless you watch Curse of Oak Island. But anyways, that's a funny joke, by the way. Have you seen Curse of Oak Island? Nobody watches that show anymore. They're never going to find the treasure. But the point of it is that there's other maybe Europeans that arrived earlier. Who knows? My point of it is that two things can be ascertained from this story. The first is that this is proof that Indigenous government exists. Because what it tells you is that there is a protocol when you walk into someone's living room and start redecorating the place. That Indigenous peoples absolutely said that if you're going to come in here, there's a way to do it. And maybe perhaps you offer a gift, you say hello, maybe you might even offer to trade, which is actually immediately what Donnacona did, because Cartier had metal, which was quite exciting. Donnacona, and what it said in the journals, is that he immediately went after metal. He said, pointed at the metal, the swords, the different tools that they had, and he said, I really want to trade for those, which tells you that the Great Moccasin Telegraph was happening all across Turtle Island. Indigenous peoples like to talk, and they absolutely knew that Europeans were coming. Here's the second thing that this tells you of, and this is what I tell my aesthetic students in Indigenous Studies at the University of Manitoba. This is proof that Indigenous writing systems exist. We understood the power of signs, we understood the power of images, and we 100% understood what it meant to put a steel cross onto the land and claim at least some kind of sense of domination, relationship, or at the very least claiming presence on the territory. We knew what a land claim was from day one, period. We understood absolutely that land claims are something in which people have to earn relationships through. So, in this simple story, in 1534, I've already proved to you Indigenous government existed pre-contact, and I've already proven that Indigenous writing and law and text exist pre-contact, because through this entire story, it tells you that Europeans were dealing with very complex, interesting, dynamic people, or what I'm just going to call and people. Because what ultimately Donnacona wanted was trade, but he also wanted relationship with Cartier, and there's a long sordid story between Donnacona and Cartier and the different controversies and connections that they had over the years. In fact, Cartier tried to get Donnacona removed by giving weapons and goods to the rival of Donnacona to get Donnacona removed from leadership. Sound familiar? Sounds a little bit familiar to the strategies that states use today. And we can sort of play out regular politics through all of this, but the important thing to understand out of all of this is that Cartier wanted a relationship despite this early turbulent bump in the relationship. Donnacona wanted a relationship with Cartier. He wanted to build something with Cartier. And it reminds me a lot of almost every single Indigenous first contact story I've ever heard. I told this to the students this morning. In one of our sacred places as Anishinaabe, Boating in Sault Ste. Marie, there's a special story about when the Blackcoats showed up in the 15th century. And the 16th century. And what the Blackcoats showed up, and they said, hey man, we want to tell you this story. It's about this guy. He's amazing. He inspires millions of people. One day he walked on water. Another day he died and came back to life. And we were like, that's a cool story. What's the name of your guy? And they're like, Jesus. We're like, we got a guy named Wînipêk who turns into a rabbit. Maybe like your guy and our guy are cousins. And the Blackcoats were like, nah, your stuff is devil-worshipping, superstitious nonsense. Our stuff is capital T truth about the guy that walks on water and magically comes back to life. And we're like, they sound like the same guy. Indigenous peoples are and peoples. And it's impossible to make hegemonic claims about anything, right? Just count how many First Nations there are in Canada, 643 plus all the ones that are struggling for recognition in the Supreme Court. And then, of course, count all the Métis communities, depending on how we use the definition. So we'll say a few hundred of those. And then, of course, Inuit communities. There's a huge diversity just amongst Inuit people, like 70, 80 Inuit recognized communities, and they all have different linguistic, geographical, regional dialects and differences. So for me to make a comment that is that all totalizing about Indigenous peoples, I have to be pretty darn confident, and I am. Every single Indigenous community are and people. Do you know why we're and people? Meaning that we don't approach things with or. We would never come up to somebody and say, oh, that story you told me is devil-worshipping, superstitious nonsense. We would never say that to somebody else because the winter is coming. And the only way we're going to survive is if we share. We work together. And if something happens in my lodge, I sure hope I have a good relationship with you so you can help me, share food with me, and that we can survive together. That's the only thing we really know. We warred, absolutely. But for those of you that came for the students, this is when we traded the roles of children. This is when we asked the children to do the work of those who were perished. Because we knew that the community down the road that we just had spent years killing, we had to live with them. And the way that you live with them is your children marry. That's how you create peace. Is that you double down on your commitments with your relatives even if you vastly disagree with them. You sit in a circle and you share ideas and you disagree, but then you have this group of people over here called the grandmothers, and they decide what is unanimous, and that's called the Supreme Court. That's Indigenous life. Almost every single Indigenous nation has that exact model. Sit in a circle, talk, disagree, and the grandmothers will decide what the unanimous decision is. And that's basically Indigenous governments 101. Oh yeah, by the way, that's democracy. And multiculturalism and free speech. Like, who came up with the idea that if we sit in a circle and we all just talk until we eventually come to some sort of agreement, and we recognize that everybody here is valuable, that we'll get somewhere? Did Europeans come up with that idea? Are you kidding me? Europeans were the ones who were like, oh, that story's devil-worshipping, superstitious nonsense. Forget all that business. And we're like, here, black coats, maybe drink some birch tea or a little scurvied up. Because the truth is that it is Indigenous peoples that invented, gifted, and created everything we are the most proud of. And the sooner that we can realize this fundamental truth, the sooner that we will realize what Canada is, which, oh, by the way, is an Indigenous word that was gifted to Cartier from Donnacona. Well, actually from his sons, Dalmagai and Patagonia, who gifted him when Cartier kept saying, where's the spices and the gold? Where's the spices and the gold? And like Cartier was obsessed. Spices and gold, spices and gold. And the son said, you know where the riches are, Cartier? Kanata. Go to Kanata. And a Kanata, of course, doesn't mean pipeline. It doesn't mean gold. It means village. The power of the village is that you're not going to be alone. If you're hungry, I have food. If I'm cold, you have a fire. And that if I get scared, you'll tell me a funny story. Or probably best of all, if something happens to me, you'll take care of my kids. Just like I'll take care of yours. That's the only truth of this place. Is that the only way we're going to survive is if we commit to each other. And Indigenous peoples are not perfect peoples, but we know the winter. And the winter teaches us that if we stick together, anything is possible. And we gifted to the newcomers everything that is the proudest parts of this country, period. Anybody who wants to tell me that Plato invented democracy? Well, first of all, he didn't even talk about democracy. He talked about the upper class, people in power. He was an authoritarian. And then secondly, is that, do you think Europeans just magically sort of found a copy of the Republic? They're like, oh, we have to come up with a government. Let's just, oh, here's a copy of Plato. Not at all. They had experience, hundreds of years, working with Indigenous communities. They saw how efficient it was, how it worked so well. And then they said, oh, well, let's start to adapt some of these ideas and put them in the Constitution. Oh, and by the way, this really screwed up Britain. Or this screwed up the monarchy. So it's quite appealing. Now, I could keep going, but I just want to show it to you. Oh, this one's supposed to have sound, but that's fine. Oh. So that's December 17th of 2012. During a movement called Idle No More, during arguably one of the most important social justice action movements in this country's history, post-civil rights movement, Indigenous peoples decided to go to public spaces, particularly malls, and invite people to dance because there was a law being passed by the government, an omnibus legislation, which sought to remove Indigenous territories without any sense of consultation or commitment, remove the protection for waters, and radically change the way Indigenous nations had relationships with the federal government. And so Indigenous peoples didn't go flip cars, didn't burn anything down, didn't shoot anybody. How's that working out with other people who have problems with the government across North America? They had that as an option. They decided to go to a mall and dance. Pretty radical. Now, what's the one thing you notice about this mall in Saskatoon, which I could have easily shown you a video in Wînipêk or Edmonton or Toronto or Montreal? What's the one thing you've noticed? Nobody's buying a thing. This is December 17th, a week before the most commercial, important moment in this continent, usually around Christmas. And nobody's buying a thing. Everyone's dancing. That's a pretty remarkable moment in which people are saying private space can become public space if we just join hands and round dance. And man, is it ever messy. Like round dancing is the most messiest thing possible. You have a really big round dance here, right? Okay, go to the round dance at the Wampum Centre and you will see the messiest, craziest dancing of all time. Some people are like, and some people are like, right? But when you ask someone to dance that you've never met before, and you put your hand out and you invite them, and then you start to dance, you will be absolutely turbulent. Some will dance high, some will dance low, some will be energetic, some will be very subtle. But you hit that moment of synchronicity. And then you learn a person you only met 30 seconds ago, you now have absolute connection with them. You are on a wavelength of synchronicity with them. And then it gets messy. Then it gets beautiful. Then it gets messy again. And that's called a relationship. I almost described all of your spousal / child / sibling relationships exactly through that. It's amazing, and then it's ugly, and then it's amazing. Because Indigenous peoples understood that if you just stick together, you can do anything. You can make absolute governments that are foundational and can create peace and harmony even after the worst of wars. You know, Dad really believed that education was that connection. Like, he really believed in education. And it's kind of ironic, though, you know, for a lawyer who spent his life fighting in the courts to realize that education and teachers were going to create the revolution in this country. Because what did he train his son to become? Like, I don't think it's any coincidence that when I approached him to be a lawyer, which is what I did way back many years ago, actually he was an ER doctor first, which I would have failed out immediately, but anyways. I watched like Noah Wiley in ER, and I was like, I can do that. Totally I can do that. I was like, no, you can't, his dad said. But when I approached him to be a lawyer, he said, why do you want to do that? You're a gifted teacher. Go be a teacher. And I think what he was doing is he was realizing that his famous phrase, education got us in this mess, education will get us out of it, and those early kernels, and realizing that conversation and dialogue and commitment is really what this is all about. Because this is a battle of ideas. Like, we can list off wars and conflicts, but really, this is a battle about ideas. Sorry, trigger warning. Sorry, trigger warning. Oh, sorry. Oh, actually, I'm not that sorry that his words got messed up in my slide. It must be a transfer of computers because it looks great on my computer. But anyways, if you read the inaugural address of President Donald J. Trump, the 46th President of the United States, on January 20th of 2025, what he said was, and I will read it to you on my computer here because it's all a little bit messed up here. He says, the United States, let me just fix my computer here. He says, the United States will once again consider itself a growing nation, one that increases our wealth, expands our territory, builds our cities, raises our expectations, and carries our flag into new and beautiful horizons. And we will pursue our manifest destiny into the stars, launching American astronauts to plant the stars and stripes on the planet Mars. He's not really talking about Mars. I got a news flash for you. Like, drill baby drill does not mean we're going to Mars. What he means is in the 19th century, John O'Sullivan wrote that Americans have the right to inherit the world because God has chosen them. Doing his best impression of Cartier, or Columbus, or De Soto. Because it's always God, isn't it? It's always God who chooses a group of people and says, hey, you have the power, you are the chosen people, and you get to inherit the rest of the world, and the rest of us have to deal with it. You know, manifest destiny is a very powerful force. And it is in the fabric of everything we do. Like, manifest destiny is not an American thing, it's not a Canadian thing, it's a world thing. And it happened in Australia, it happened in New Zealand, it happens in Africa, it happens in Asia. It's happening everywhere because there is always a justification to choose God as the excuse to take land and to disinherit Indigenous peoples from space. And I don't even have to really argue this in terms of like let's talk about grade 6, shall we? Okay, remember grade 6? No, you're like blacked it out. Yeah. Grade 6, teacher walks in, says, hey everybody, let's color Canada. And you're like, totally cool. Get out your pencil crayons. Here we go. I know this one. And then you're like, Canada. How many colors do you need to color Canada? 2, land and water. Now, if you are old like me, how many provinces, how many territories? 10 and 2, because you're old like me. Now, 1999, do I have a pointer, by the way, in this? Do I have a pointer? Oh, I do. I'm very excited. Okay. 1999, Nunavut is created, right? Now, you know why Nunavut's created? It's mostly because of the Cold War. In the 1940s, post-World War II, Canada really badly needs to claim the North. And part of claiming the North is working with Inuit people who say, nah, you can't just come up here and claim the land, you got to work with us. And most importantly, let's work to form some kind of way that we can form institutional government up here. That's my glass half full way of seeing that. Canada then had to go to court a number of times because they kept trying to take the land, and then eventually Inuit people said, okay, fine, let's make a territory. That was like a very terrible explanation of a very 50 years of struggle in the courts and political stuff and so on. But basically what Canada had to do was recognize that Inuit title exists and that there's a special, unique relationship Inuit people have with Canada. In many ways, Nunavut is like a formation of treaty. I'm not sure Inuit people would always be comfortable with that description, but generally kind of a treaty-like, which creates Nunavut. So basically, recognize Indigenous land title, and then you get new territory. So in 1999, suddenly we now need 14 colors to color the map. 10 provinces, 3 territories. All right. What did Justin Trudeau do on the final week that he was in office in January? He recognized, see this little land right here? It's called Haida Gwaii. He recognized Haida title, not Indigenous title, which is under the Constitution. He said that the Haida people, and the Supreme Court just affirmed it, have ownership over their own territory. They're not through Canadian law, it's something else. Haida people have ownership over their own territory. So what did we just see the birth of? Probably not tomorrow, but let's say 5-10 years from now. The 15th pencil crayon, everybody. Yeah, because Canada's map's always shifting and changing, and Indigenous people seem to be at the center of this. That's interesting. But we've generally erased Indigenous peoples from the map unless it's Canada for some kind of political purpose, recognizes Indigenous peoples. Well, what if we just spent one class or one unit or 1 year studying Indigenous territory? Do you have enough pencil crayons? Do you? If you did, you'd realize 2 significant truths. You'd realize, this is where multiculturalism comes from. This is multicultural. Where else would you have the idea that you bring your culture in, you work with the existing people there, you don't give up your culture, in fact, you overlap with another culture, and you become a fuller, complete people as a result, each having your own private places of worship, but then you can come together for certain social gatherings and unique expressions of your identity. We'll call that feasting, pipe ceremonies, but we'll also call that lodges, longhouses. Who invented multiculturalism? Now, you'd realize in grade 6 that Indigenous peoples gave us the greatest example of what we call the Canadian mosaic or the Canadian identity. Remember what's the number one thing we do to differentiate ourselves from the States? We say, the States is a melting pot, we are multicultural. Well, the most important, that's chapter 2 actually. Chapter 1 is, most important thing is that we listen to Indigenous peoples. And we said, hey, let's create a country out of it. And by the way, this is where democracy, healthcare, let's try healthcare. Who else would come up with the idea that we take all of our food, we put it in a pile, and then we distribute it amongst the people? You think a feudal system with a king or a pope had that idea? No. If you brought a moose back to the community, and you hunted it, you harvested it, and then eventually you kept it, do you think that I was gonna fill it full of my lodge? Where would I store it, first off? And then second is, what would happen if I kept all the moose? What would you do next time you had a moose? You'd keep it all. And pretty soon the community just falls apart. We share the moose not because we want to, but because that's the only functional way to live. It's not the right thing to do, it's the only thing to do. That's what is the challenge of this country. You know what the challenge of this country is? What's that thing about when we do the same silly thing over and over again? The definition of insanity is doing the same wrong thing over and over again. Well, that's the story of Canada. Any moment in history, And this is Elsie Booktook. Elsie Booktook, oh, can you play that video up there? But no sound, okay? Wherever you are. Oh. This is Elsie Booktook. Now, Elsie Booktook, if you heard the video, you hear a lot of swearing, a lot of conflict, and there is some trigger warning here, so I just want you to know that there's nobody hurt in this video other than pepper spray here. Elsie Booktook in New Brunswick was found to have shale gas underneath their territory. They have historically used and occupied that territory since time immemorial. Even when they've been placed onto that reserve, that's part of their traditional territory. And Canada sees shale gas as one of the new economic livelihoods of this country. And so the government of New Brunswick made an agreement with a drilling company to frack in their community, which is, if you know fracking, it's a diagonal drilling program. And what happened is that they sent the police in. And as you can see here, the police are absolutely not welcome. In fact, the confrontation that would take place would often lead to tear gas and to pepper spray. And it was a very conflictual, terrible situation and circumstance. In fact, you're going to see something very difficult right now. What you'll see here is a man who's about to brandish a gun, an automatic weapon, and he's reaching it out, and you'll see a leader in the community who goes up to him, and he challenges him in front of a guard dog and says, "Shoot me, don't shoot the community." And right in front of him is his sister, who says, "Shoot me, don't shoot him. We need him. He's our leader." And one of the hardest things to watch here is that cool heads prevail in the end. But who has the guns? Who is making this conflict? And then most of all, one of the hardest things to see out of all of this is who are the ones who are building relationships? Because despite all the conflict, despite all the pain, look who always offers a hand. Now, that's the definition of "and people." That's what "and people" looks like. And yeah, it's not easy to watch. Yeah, absolutely not hard. It's not easy to watch that. It's very painful to see a community in such distress facing off against a country that has a flag that has a maple leaf right in front of it, selling itself the story that it's this maple syrupy place. I know it's hard to watch. This is the truth, and this is very hard to see because it's hard to have hope in all of this. And you can get caught up in despair. I get it. It's very hard to sort of see an opportunity here of looking at things in a hopeful way. Can you go ahead about 30 seconds? Oh, no, don't jump ahead that much. Go to about 2.5. Oh, you got to give them the hope, though. You got to give them the hope. So can you just jump ahead? Go to the bottom. Go to your... Oh, my gosh. Okay. All right. Well, I'll just have to tell you what happens, so blame your technology here. What happens is the camera pans across the crowd. Skip to the next one so they're not distracted. So the camera pans across the crowd. And right across the crowd on the other side, facing against the police officers who have now created a wall, is 8 grandmothers who are singing hand drum songs to the police. And one of them is smudging their guns. And that's called a badass granny. And not only is that a badass granny, but that is exactly the definition of reconciliation and the definition of "and." Is that no matter how much we face against violence, claimings of our territory, manifest destiny, the way that we face that is we maintain the integrity of who we are. And I would call that as the most Canadian of Canadian responses. Like, if we really believe that we are a peaceful, just people, if we really believe that we are a country based in multiculturalism, democracy, free speech, we have to double down on those values more than ever. We have to believe that it is not acceptable to remove people because we disagree with them. I don't care what political stripe you are in. There's a woman coming to the University of Manitoba, and I don't even want to justify her appearance, but she comes and she says that residential schools are a scam, Kamloops was a hoax, And Indigenous peoples lie to try to get more money from the government. And she wants to come and give a lecture on campus. Go right ahead. I have the right to not go. I have also the right to say that what you're saying is factually incorrect. And here's the thousands of credentialed research that point that out. And if you want to argue that gravity doesn't exist, go right ahead, but that doesn't mean you get to fly planes. And that's precisely the challenge that we have. The challenge that we have as a country is, here we are. This is my favorite picture. This is in my book. A guy named John Woods, who's one of our photographers at the Free Press. I love this picture because this was an elder who was standing up against police presence in the downtown core of Wînipêk, which is a very difficult place. It's full of people who are very much struggling. All Indigenous peoples, by the way. In Wînipêk, about 95% of the people in the child welfare system who are sleeping in tents, who are in the jails, all Indigenous. We have a real challenge where I come from. And what this elder did is he stood in traffic with his regalia on as a message to say, slow down. Let's look at each other. Let's see each other. Let's see each other as human beings. Like, what does it mean to show the beauty of who we are to each other? How can we take time, even in traffic, the place we're encouraged to speed up the most and move through the most, to just stop and look at each other? That's Dad. You know, Dad is exactly that guy who stood in the fastest lanes of this country and said, let's look at each other. Let's take time to spend thinking about each other. I understand he was here, 6 years ago? You're very lucky. 6 years ago, he wasn't traveling all that much anymore, so you're kind of lucky. Was he in a wheelchair then? No, but he was probably hobbling, maybe a cane. No, he was looking good, yeah. Dad's health went very quickly. I will say that he gave you his all. He gave you the whole thing. And to our frustration, he gave you everything. So he must have loved you, because he sure loved us, but he also loved you. He loved this country so much, he literally died working for you. He did. He went off the road, got COVID, never really got healthy ever after that. Went into the hospital just a few months after my mom passed, and he died. He died. And he died so quickly and so fast, we were just kind of blinking our eyes going like, what the heck happened there? But I will tell you that one of the great gifts about Dad was that I actually got to spend time with him. Like, what a gift that was, that he got the last few months where he was in a hospital bed and he couldn't move. And I kept saying, you can't go to Vancouver now, Dad. You got to just sit with me. Because Dad liked to go and fight for all of you. But you know, one of the things that he said, and I think you quoted it at the beginning, his famous phrase, he said at the end of the TRC calls, when they released the final report, he said, we have shown you the mountain. What's the exact quote? He said, we have described for you a mountain. We have shown you the way to the top. We call upon you to do the climbing. Notice that he didn't say, we call upon, he says, we have described for you a mountain. We have shown you the way to the top. We now call upon Niigaan to do the climbing. Or Justin Trudeau to do the climbing. He said you. He spent time with you so that you would be empowered, that you would believe in yourself. He did this for you. He did this so that you take this work on. It's now your turn, man. It's your turn to do this work. It's not my turn. I mean, I'm doing the best I can too, but it is your turn to do this work. That's what I said to your students this morning. That's what I said to your students and your faculty this afternoon. It's not up to me. It is 100%. I will never, nor will there ever be, another Murray Sinclair. Do not wait for that. Do it now. As he says, he'd always grab his crooked finger and he'd go, get up. Do it. I'm not only going to tell you how so long. Now it's time for you to do it. Actually, this is what Dad always did. He always did this. That's really what I hope that we see in the streets across this country, because the truth is that this country is at a really critical juncture. I told the students about this earlier today. We have raised the most competent generation in history. They all know There's residential schools, Indian Act, land theft has happened. They also know that Indigenous peoples have contributed the most significant and important things in the country. And that we as Canadians, all of us, have to realize that we owe every single thing, every penny on our paychecks, every single policy, every single home, every single inch of what we do has to involve Indigenous peoples at the center, period. And so we have to tell the Prime Minister, you can't just decide that you've got an emergency this week, which, by the way, there's always an emergency. It's never not an emergency. And then just ignore Indigenous peoples and not make a law that says one Canadian economy and then just leave out all the First Nations people. Like, enough. We've done that game for 150 years, and it's extremely inefficient. It leads to Elsie Booktook. Like, I think it's kind of cute that grandmothers smudge handguns too, but I don't think that's the Canada that people want. I think what the Canada that people want is a Canada that that lives up to the very name. Or, if I can be so bold, if you make a territorial acknowledgement, you actually have to believe it. Like, you have to do something about it. You can't just say it. Like, do something now. Get up. And here's what I mean by that. Pretty soon you're going to have no choice. Like, you might have a choice right now, but I don't think you really do have a choice. Nobody's growing faster than Indigenous peoples. Like, nobody. We are growing a third every 10 years. And that means by the 2026 census, we're going to be at the highest First Nations, Inuit, Métis people possibly since, let's say, the 15th, 16th, 17th century. While we were at one point near to 800,000 people, we're now looking at 2.2 million by 2026. We have bigger families, people are self-identifying and recognizing more than ever, and nations are becoming bigger and more power brokers than ever before. They're getting land claims, they're working within urban reserves, and they are becoming part of the national economy in ways that are unprecedented. In Manitoba, the top 10 investment projects in the city of Wînipêk are all Indigenous based. They're the Noweo-Dana project, the massive development, water park, hotel conference center, hockey rink. In downtown, the largest museum by the Manitoba Métis Federation. When the Hudson Bay Company stopped making money in Wînipêk, the first sign they didn't make money, they left. And then the Southern Chiefs organization was like, we'll take that building. We'll make housing out of it. We'll make a medical center out of it. And we'll make a place for commercial development so every single Winnipegger now get a great place to go buy their tobacco, or to buy their ribbon dress, or to go get cannabis, if you like that kind of thing. But everybody benefits from a hockey rink, everybody benefits from conference centers, and while multinational corporations take billions of dollars out of communities to places that are overseas, you know what's your biggest thing if you are a patriot? Indigenous business, because all of it stays right here. It recycles. When First Nations make money, everybody wins. It's not the other way around. When Canada makes money, First Nations usually lose out. They usually have their land stolen, their resources stolen. Let's change that formula so that when everybody wins, everybody wins. That seems to be kind of a Canada thing. But when we do that, we have to realize that we got extra work to do in other places. And this is where my argument comes in. If we look at the highest proportional Indigenous populations, and if Indigenous populations are truly growing fast, we've got a critical moment on our hands, and here it is. The Canadian population has peaked at 35 to 59 years old. That means the biggest group of people are in this room, biggest group. The biggest group of First Nations people are your students. Second biggest group, me. And let me just give you the model of what it looks like. Dad was the first of an industry. He was the first Indigenous judge in Manitoba history, second in Canada. That meant that his entire career was defined by dealing with racism. The entire time, that every single moment that he was in a courtroom, in a boardroom, in a classroom, he was arguing for why is it that there was no one that looked like him before in that place. Now, all he could do is recommend changes because he was too busy fighting for how do we get us in the room? Me, my generation, is the critical mass. We can actually do changes. What are we doing? We're policy changes, Many of us are becoming in upper admin. We're professionals, the largest group of professionals, the middle class. There are so many of us that are not making it, so we need to make sure that we're opening doors, still bringing people in, doing dad's work, but now we're doing our own work. We're remaking the institution. You know what this group's doing? Things that have never been imagined before. They're actually going, I don't really want your institution. I want to do something else. Your institution can't be fixed. Your institution's based in some highly problematic ideas, and so we're going to do something else. We're going to make a whole new institution. And your students this morning, I showed you what Sarah did, which was my daughter, which was imagine an Indigenous orchestra. Well, I know I mentioned her this morning, so here she is, everybody. These are the Manitoba Indigenous Youth Achievement Award winners in 2022. There's Sarah, that's my daughter right there. This is proud papa moment. But, I could keep talking about all these amazing young people. See this right here? See her? That's Miauta Stout. Miauta's idea is that we should have adequate nursing stations and bring midwifery back to First Nations. And as I spoke about to some of the students this morning, but I'll say this here, there is no bigger expression of sovereignty of whether you can stand up for yourself and provide for yourself as if you can birth your own children. And so for First Nations, that is the most important struggle, being able to birth your own children. And Miauta believes it can happen. She's at McMaster. And she's bringing that teachings back to Manitoba, working with communities. And do you know why you should be cheering for her? Obviously, it's kind of cool. If you support First Nation sovereignty, good on you. But if Miauta is successful, she will have saved Canadian healthcare $80,000 per birth. Do you know what Miauta's probably you should cheer for her? Because she's probably going to fix the pothole problem. She's going to fix healthcare herself. And she's probably going to also create a new justice system along the way as well. Because the money that she's going to save by helping First Nations to be able to adequately deliver their own children is going to be a remarkable tax savings. And that alone should make you go Miauta, go. I'll just keep going. How about Tecumseh? See Tecumseh right here? Tecumseh believes that if we feed elders in communities, and many elders who are impoverished because of long series of policies that have created poverty on First Nations, which are imposed. Nobody chooses poverty, and also nobody chooses diabetes. Like, anybody who thinks that First Nations people like diabetes, you're just wrong. Like, elders get sick because you can't afford the food because you're gouged by the northern store and having to pay $50 for ground beef, never mind vegetables. You know what Tecumseh believes? We can actually do that from the land. We can harvest medicines and food. If we teach the young people, they can do that for the elders, and they can also have fun hunting deer in a limited way, in a controlled way, and we can do it in a respectful way so that we use the entirety of the deer or the moose. Tecumseh is literally fixing the healthcare system. He should be your champ to fix healthcare, because if he's successful, that means less waiting times in ERs. That means less waiting times for surgeries. That means that you will get more doctors in your system because Tecumseh will be successful. I can keep going. Want me to keep going? Here's Daryl. He won an award because he believes that Taekwondo can save kids in the child welfare system. If we train every kid to breathe properly, to get their frustrations out, like Daryl, who's a black belt, is that he can start his own facility to work with kids in the child welfare system, and they can all gain amazing abilities. And they'll be able to deal with their anger, and they'll be more productive and less likely to use the justice system. Daryl is your one stop for justice fixing. I keep going. I'll do this one right here. I'm very proud of Trishelle because she was my student. Trishelle was a little bit older in this picture. She was 21 in this picture. She was the captain of the University of Manitoba Bison women's hockey team. She's a big goal scorer. But on this night, she saw all these amazing Indigenous, First Nations, Inuit, Métis young people who were all nominated by teachers, all of them non-Indigenous, who stood up for them, who wrote reports for them, who were allies with them and said, "We believe in you," and they nominated for them for these awards. She was so inspired, she said, "I'm going to run for chief of my community." And everybody went, yay, as if she's going to do that. And then she did it and won. And she became the youngest chief in North American history in Manitoba at 24 years old. Yeah, amazing. Here's my point, is that we have raised the most competent generation in history of both First Nations, Inuit, Métis young people who are proud of themselves and doing things we never thought possible. Remaking the healthcare system, remaking the justice system, doing things that we have never possibly conceived, like even becoming chief of their community when normally chiefs are in their 40s, 50s. We said, well, I'll be a 24-year-old chief, why not? That's what happens when you get a generation of dreamers. And do you know why they're dreamers? Is because they have also Canadians, immigrant, newcomer people standing right beside them who believe in them too. That's what happens when we all come together and we invest in a group of people to make them possible and dream. Now, all these people in this picture, they all turned either 18 or they were first-time voters in Manitoba when 2023 rolled around. So Sarah, for example, there she is. She's 17 in this picture. She turns 18 the following year, and she gets to vote for the first time in October of 2023 in the Manitoba provincial election. I wonder what these guys did. Now, the first thing you need to know about why I said that is not because to believe in NDP governments. In fact, NDP governments were some of the worst governments to First Nations and Inuit Métis people ever in our provincial history. I'm not even telling you Wab Kinew is an amazing premier. That's a debatable fact. I'll tell you that he did stand on the fact that we should search a landfill where the other party said we shouldn't, and he found those women in 18 million under 30 days. Where they said it was never going to happen and it was going to cost $180 million. What a bunch of kablooey that was. So he did some good stuff. I'm just telling you this, that in Manitoba, that election was won by 17,000 votes in about 7 ridings. I'm telling you that these guys had something to do with it, because there was 20,000 of them who first time voted. I don't think all of them voted NDP. I think a couple of them did, but I actually think it was their friends. Their non-Indigenous friends who they work with, live beside, or date, who said, it's not acceptable that we leave women in a landfill of any group, and particularly Indigenous women. And it was Manitobans who said that. It was non-Indigenous Manitobans, Canadians just like yourselves, who said, if we believe in and, we can do anything. We might even save the world. You know, next Tuesday, you're going to be invited to put on an orange shirt. And I saw there's a couple out there tonight. Way to go. When you wear that orange shirt, what you're doing, of course, is recognizing the experience of Phyllis Webstat and her experience having had her orange shirt removed as a Shwapbuk woman out in BC, having that terrible experience of being sent to residential school, and you're honoring survivors. So that's wonderful. But what you're also doing is something really remarkable, is you start moving and walking and working with others, and you all commit to an idea for a day, and you move together. Not perfectly. In fact, that's a day when you probably are the most messy. But every once in a while, you hit a synchronicity. Maybe you all walk, and this beautiful wave of orange comes across the screen. Can you do that on a Wednesday? Can you do it more than just a day? Can you do it when you vote, or when you work, or when you raise your children? That's the real challenge of Orange Shirt Day. It's not about just that day, it's about how do we create that forever. Because we might just be able to work and make the rest of this place beautiful. We might find some centers that we're taught are not the center, and we might realize that all of us in this together, if we stick together and we know the winter's coming, we will know what to do. With that, I say a big miigwech, and thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think we've got some time for a few questions, and I think if there's also an opportunity for some book signings, if you've got some time for that. So if you're able, there are microphones here at the very front of the hall. There's also one sort of midsection there. If not, just raise your hand and we'll come to you with a microphone. So Niigaan, we can take maybe 2 or 3 questions. Okay.
Sure, I think there's a mic somewhere if you want to use that. Is a mic? Talk into the box. If you could just introduce yourself if you could.
Dan Veer, I work at the hospitals as chaplain. Amazing talk, thank you very much. Do you believe then the heroes of the young people will be able to refine or redefine the structures of government to make it more comprehensive, more of a circle, more efficient?
Do you want my real answer? I was going to say, do you want my depressing answer, or do you want my long-term answer, which is hopeful? You know what the biggest problem with these young people is? Us. That our generation never learned any of this, and that's not our fault. It's just we never learned it. Now, luckily, some of us have picked it up and we've been trained, or we've had mentors like my father. So you've spent time with Dad. You've spent time with amazing elders in our community who have done this work. So this means that those of us who are, let's say, 40 and above, you've really been set up to fail, because the school system didn't educate you appropriately on what was the most critical issue of this country. Because math is not the most critical issue of this country, nor is science, nor is ELA, nor is social studies. It was learning about Indigenous peoples and how all of those things will help you to understand how to build relationships. So it's like you spent your entire career in school learning about, obsessing about, memorizing chapter 2, and you never learned chapter 1. So now you're asked to make decisions as a prime minister, as a premier, as a CEO, as a president, they name them all off. Wherever you work in your life, you are, and this is where I'm going to get a little bit, I don't mean to be negative, but it's really true. You're not competent to deal with the issues in this country. And that doesn't mean you're bad people. It really doesn't. It just means that we have to get to a state of competency. And that means you're going to have to work extra hard. You're going to have to work with, and listen to people, like believe, they know their stuff. And if there's anything, young people, and if I could speak a little bit to the young people, you got to show some patience. I know it's not easy because you want change to happen tomorrow. I know that. And you got to wait for all of us to catch up. We will only go by the speed in which we are all ready for. And that means we got to compromise. We got to care for each other. And we're going to make a lot of mistakes. And calling each other out is not going to fix it. In fact, calling each other out is going to create a lot of division. It's actually probably the most least Indigenous thing we could do. It is all about, we can be accountable, but we can also be kind. And so what I mean is that the problem really is us. We are not ready for that change. And so when young people are like, hey, listen, maybe we should deal with this fact that people are sleeping outside. And we're like, that's just the way it is. And we have to listen more and work doubly more and realize that the status quo of what we were taught was the normal is not the normal. It is a constructed normal, and it is harming people, and therefore we need to change that. We need to work hard to do it. My point of it is that those young people are going to be eventually in government, but guess what's going to happen? They're going to have young people right behind them who think they're too slow. But I really do believe that young people know that there's a problem, and they realize that it is not acceptable to just keep saying it's just the way it is. And so therefore, what I would say is that I think that we've got innovative solutions. And if I could be a little bit partisan just for a second, it is really true, no matter what you think about him, Justin Trudeau is the only prime minister to care. He's the only prime minister that did anything. Every prime minister before that did nothing, or worse, harmed people openly. Stephen Harper, Brian Mulroney, Jean Chrétien, Paul Martin. Paul Martin, tried at the end but didn't try enough to get reelected, so that doesn't really count. And then, Pierre Trudeau was the worst. He tried erasing all of our rights. So my point of it is that every prime minister was brutal to us, and then Justin Trudeau tried, I would say failed as much as he succeeded. I give a talk that I say the Trudeau legacy is probably defined as much by hubris as it is defined by success. But that's 10 years of trying to engage Indigenous peoples meaningfully, not perfectly, but we need to double down on that commitment and do more than ever. And who brought Justin Trudeau to office? It was young people in 2015. 2015 voted that government in and gave them the largest mandate, and then over time period, I think he lost steam and energy and commitment and politics. But my point of it is that I think that we saw a little glimpse of that in 2015 when when they said, oh, it's 2015, we got to create gender parity in the cabinet, we got to commit to Indigenous rights, and Justin Trudeau apologized 5 times to Indigenous peoples 5 times. That goes a very long way to show that a relationship was important. Now, I'm not telling you that we changed anything in 10 years, but we made a step. And so I hope we make more steps, and I think it will come with more innovative, younger people who are more competent. And it's not that we don't have competent things to say, we just have to work doubly hard at it because it's so late in the game now. Sorry, that was my long answer to your very short question, so thank you guys. Thank you. Now this is where we pass the box. Why don't you just throw the box into the air and just see who grabs it? I think that's pretty, oh, there you go.
Hello, my name's Emily. I'm a third-year student here at King's. My question for you is, so in terms of empowering our youth and creating an environment where they can become the leaders of tomorrow like you showed us, I believe that a community is essential for that. But in the world that we are in, community isn't as apparent, like we're very divided. So how might you suggest that we foster community within London or wherever we're coming from to kind of empower these youth of tomorrow?
So, I think probably the community people is probably best to talk to on this one, because I don't want to talk about the intricacies of community, so I'll just talk broad strokes, okay? So sort of broad brushes. The most important thing is to realize that don't buy into the hype. The fact is that we are exactly where we need to be now. And yes, it feels urgent because of this US president calling us a 51st state, I know. But it wasn't that, it was Sir John A. Macdonald freaking out that thinking America's going to colonize in 1885 and creating the train line. There's always an emergency. There's never not an emergency. And there's always a justification to remove Indigenous peoples from the equation or from discussions or from negotiations. We have to say enough is enough, and we have to join together and say we are in this together. And at times, we have to be outside the room, and we have to make demands collectively together, but we have to remember that no change happens without some of us in the room. And so don't judge those people in the room as being sellouts or being not, we have to make sure that they are connected with us, and that means that the central teaching of what I'm trying to say is kindness, generosity, love will always be what wins the day. It will never be by a 140 character tweet or, we all hate X now, but you know what I mean. It will never be through deciding unilaterally and arbitrarily who are the bad ones and who are the good ones, because the fact is that we're all in this together. And this is hard for me because I'm mad about the Indigenous Advisory Council too. I'm mad that they handpicked people that they would like and that are going to be pro whatever politics they decide. But I also know that those people are trying their best to try to navigate what is a difficult situation. I don't think it's the most productive way to move forward, so that means that we have to double down on talking to each other and standing beside each other and making sure that we remember that the central core teaching, if you are an Anishinaabe and you know this is our creation story, but I actually think this is all life, is that creation is defined by love. Everything bends towards love, except for humanity, which we decide that to go against love. We're like people who are like, oh, we can dream outside of love. But we also, when we go with love, look how far we get in creation. I gave the metaphor this morning is when you work with the current of creation, you get very far. But when you work against it, you build a lot of muscle. And there's never any time in the river that you are not doing both at the same time. So we have to struggle. There's never not going to be a time of struggle. And what I said to the students this morning is the university is never going to be a safe place for Indigenous peoples ever. So just realize that that's the part of being in the gig. And that doesn't mean we throw up our hands and run away. We say we got to double down on this place and we got to work really hard to help this place grow, because this place came from certain philosophies, geographies, cultures. And that doesn't mean we throw up our hands, because we didn't do that when metal showed up. We didn't do that when Christianity showed up. We didn't do that when English showed up or the internet. So why are we suddenly like turning on the university? That means we realize that the university is always going to have its limitations. That it's also going to be amazing for us. It's going to get these pieces of paper, these certification, and get us in the room. But don't lose your teachings on the way. The teachings are the most important things to bring with you, because they are the ones that are outside of the room, and you bring them inside the room by working here, by working, the university's got to be open to that. Got to be realized that when you have Indigenous anything in this place, it's never going to fit. And that's the university's problem. That's not the Indigenous problem. That's the university's challenge, is how do we open up these walls? How do we open up policy? How do we be inclusive? Because that's what knowledge is about. We're actually a better university when we have Indigenous content and individuals and faculty members, but it's going to involve the reality that teaching service and research are going to look profoundly different. Is that helpful? Good. I went off on a big activity report ramble there. Sorry about that. As you can tell, I have a department head. So, yeah, go another one. Yeah. I'm on a roll now. I'm sitting down.
Hi, my name's Julia, and I'm a fourth-year poli-sci English student here. And in my poli-sci career, I've heard a lot about domestic relations with indigeneity, but in a time of conflict, I'm wondering abroad how that would look in fostering Indigenous qualities and values on an international scale, if that's something you can touch on.
Yeah, I mean, this is where Mary Simon is. If you ever get a chance to spend time with Mary Simon, or just YouTube Mary Simon and hear her stories of the creation of the United Nations Declaration. For years, we had more productive conversations with international Indigenous movements than we did here, because we would get no foothold here. For instance, the federal government never recognized that our experiences were legitimate and that were genocide. The federal government never recognized that Indigenous rights even existed, or that's not true. The Supreme Court told them it existed, but their federal government refused to define what it is. And even though defining what it is would have been inherently colonial, but at least it would have been something, right? So now we're stuck with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, because at least it's something, right? And at least it articulates kind of 46 articles of what Indigenous rights entails. That happens out of international movements. And I would say that my experience is that Indigenous peoples internationally do very well, because one of the things that's remarkable about colonialism is a template that is almost the exact same across the world. And in fact, if you look at colonial governments like South Africa, who studied Canada, and Canada, who studied different movements across Eastern Europe, and all the ways in which we created the reserve system from, and then we go, oh my gosh, Nazi Germany really liked the reserve system. And we sort of, there's a whole sort of template that colonialism looks like globally. But it's the reactions to colonialism that are the most fascinating. And Indigenous peoples internationally, I think, have a lot to say to each other about how to resist, how to remake, how to revitalize. And I mean, the best, have you read much? There's Marcus Adorno, there's my brain is bending at the end of the day. The Colonized and the Colonizer, Memi, read some Memi. Because what it's talking about is kind of talking about global movements of colonization and what Indigenous peoples globally do to resist and to remake those things. And what you discover is most times They come with a whole heap of really interesting support from international movements with each other. Next door. Yeah, I was gonna say thanks.
Maybe we have time for one more question.
Oh,
If there's one, is that okay? Oh, I'm sorry.
Is that how we work? Okay, perfect.
That's how we work.
Probably the best thing, just let him go. So,
Hi there, Ryan Hoffer, English student. Sorry for tossing this particular grenade into the conversation, but for those of us who have Indigenous friends, colleagues, maybe even family or just people we know who are either LGBTQ plus or disabled or have another sort of aspect of their being, how do we support them through that process of their identity without downplaying either their Indigenous heritage or their other personage?
that's not a grenade at all. I think that's brilliant, and Miigwech for asking that. Good old English student. Good. I'm one too. So I wrote a piece which said, and it was, there is no word for disability in Indigenous languages. So one of the things, that was the title of my piece, by the way. So now that's a hegemonic statement. But the thing that you realize is what we often call LGBTQ2+, or queer. There's two interesting fundamental truths about Anishinaabe, and that's the one I'm going to speak about for just a minute. The first is that everything about Anishinaabe is queer. Yeah. There is nothing that is male only eternally forever and only female eternally forever. Everything is regional, everything is political, everything is based in time and place. Do you think that, if we said to ourselves, okay, men take care of fire and women take care of water, do you think that when all the men are off hunting, the women are just, I guess we're just going to be cold now? Have you met Indigenous women? They're like, we'll make a fire and we probably do it better. Do you think that when the men are on the trap line or out there hunting, that they're sitting there going, I guess we're just going to be thirsty? No, here's my point, is that there is no gender binary in indigeneity. It's not a formative idea. Did it hit us and inherit it? Yeah, for sure. So did homosexuality, which was also an invention. These are invented ideas that are determined in geographical places and times, particularly in Europe, mostly for property purposes, and they just hit us like a freight train upon the arrival and the imposition of Victorian ideals and identity. My point of it is that we have to realize that Indigenous peoples, everything from heteronormativity to binaristic gender identities to abilities are made up terms. They're arbitrary terms. And one of the great things that we realized when we do that was that there was always a place for everything. Everything's a place. And that if we don't have so-called two-spirit or gay or whatever the term is, because everybody wants to use a different term, and so I respect the sovereignty of people in which they want to do that. They want to call themselves gay, they want to call themselves queer. Here's some flash news for you. I don't really know if am I hetero, am I homo, am I queer? I would say I'm all of the above. And I say that because I wouldn't ever say, I believe in love. How about that? That's what I believe in. And so love for me is a possibility of amazingness. But I also realize that I love the land. That's what Josh Whitehead writes. He goes, I have an intimate relationship with the land. And so what do you call that sexuality? It's not the terrible, horrible terms we use to describe that. It's actually Anishinaabe. That's what we use to describe it. So anyways, I went off on a big gender sexuality thing there. You asked about ability. What I would say is, what I wrote in my piece was, we would never see disability in Anishinaabe. What we would see is what an incredible gift now, because we get to learn about someone, or we get to learn from someone who is now an expert in hearing instead of seeing. If we focus ourselves on hearing or on seeing, and now we have an expert on hearing, what a gift for a community. In fact, I can't think of anything you would need more out there on the trap line than somebody who can hear much more distinctly than the rest of us. And in fact, we would probably see that person as the most important person in the community, which is, by the way, how we saw so-called queer, LGBTQ2+. I say so-called meaning, I don't, like, there's no words for our language for that. What I would simply say is Anishinaabe. Just the whole thing is Anishinaabe.
Yes.
Okay, I think that was the last one, and you're reaching for the mic.
I want to make sure there's opportunities. Your book is here for sale, so we give people a chance to, also if you're able to, I know you've had a long day, and we're really grateful. So just a few words of thanks. First, of course, thank you, Niigaan. You shared wisdom, you shared vision, you gave us insight, but you also gave us a challenge. So, and a challenge to think differently, but also to act. I also want to express our gratitude to the Sisters of St. Joseph's for their generous sponsorship of the President's Lecture Series, and for finding, through this series, new ways of giving witness to justice and compassion and hope. And just invite you, if you're able, there are donation boxes here at the front of the hall and outside. All of the proceeds go to St. Joe's Cafe, the important work that they do. Again, very briefly, special word of thanks also to Dr. Alison Larkin of the Social Justice and Peace Department here at King's for her leadership and dedication, helping to enrich this lecture series and strengthen the intellectual and spiritual life of our community. I have to say thank you also to many colleagues in the President's office and across King's who worked hard to make this evening possible. Their planning and the care that they took to prepare for the event make sure that gatherings like this become spaces of welcome and dialogue. And thank you to all of you for joining us. Your presence reflects a shared commitment to learning and to conversation. So wish you all a safe journey home. Chi miigwech, and good evening. Thank you.